This is the A-10 Warthog, and it's turning Iranian proxy tactics into nothing but training evolution. After 3 years without a major combat deployment, America's most rugged aircraft is back in theater. And this time, it's not just covering troops, it's striking mobile launcher teams before they escape. Equipped with some amazing systems, these aircraft are now tasked with one of the hardest missions in the playbook: destroy launcher teams before they hide. But little do the Houthis know, this old dog has a few tricks up its sleeve still. On March 29, 2025, several A-10 Warthogs from the 124th Fighter Wing and 300 ground crew from the 190th Fighter Squadron deployed to the Middle East. This deployment marks the largest such deployment of this infamous aircraft in 3 years, and it's for more than just showing the flag. Operating out of Dhafra Air Base in the UAE, these aircraft are giving a big helping hand to the Navy as they battle a foe with ever-revolving tactics. This is because the Houthis are developing so-called shoot and scoot tactics to avoid detection. And the basic playbook goes like this. Houthi gunners receive targeting data from Iranian IRGC advisors via Starlink terminals. After getting the data, the Houthis roll out camouflage missile launchers from mountain caves. These missiles are typically C-802s that carry a 165-kilogram armor-piercing payload and can reach targets up to 180 kilometers away. Although not the most advanced missile in the world, fire enough of them and there will be more than a few close calls. However, because the Houthis know that as soon as they fire, the US is going to eat them like a Nikocado avocado mukbang, so they have to displace. This usually means rolling the launchers out of hidden caves, tunnels, or valleys, firing, and just as soon as the missile leaves the rails, tucking it away. This is where the A-10 comes in to put a stop to this. The first confirmed strike came on April 1st. After taking off from their airbase, the Warthogs were on station within 18 minutes. Thanks to its 11,000-pound fuel tank capacity, the A-10s can loiter over target areas for up to 90 minutes before having to head back to base. However, when accompanied by KC-135 tankers, these pigs can stay airborne as long as they have ammunition on board. And oh boy, does this thing have a pretty mean business end. See that barrel sticking out of the nose? That's the GAU-8 Avenger rotary cannon that stretches nearly 19 feet along the belly of the aircraft and pokes out through the nose. It fires 30mm armor-piercing shells at 3,900 rounds per minute. Each round is almost half a pound and tipped with depleted uranium. With this capability, it can shred tanks in a matter of seconds. And against soft-skinned vehicles or exposed personnel that make up Houthi launcher teams, well, the results speak for themselves. On that day, a circling RC-135 rivet joint intercepted Houthi radio signals that they were going to launch a strike soon. Because the US had destroyed practically every secure communications method the Houthis had, enemy commanders in the field have to rely on regular civilian cell phones to talk to each other, which makes finding these guys that much easier. The attack was supposed to go down in less than 20 minutes, so the two A-10s punched it at full power to get there. With a max speed of about 420 miles per hour, it would take roughly 18 minutes to get there, with not a second to spare. As the A-10s flew across the mountains and desert of central Yemen, the pilots are using this device to scan for the targets. This is called the AN/AAQ-28 Lightning Pod, and is how the pilot ensures that the A-10's payloads make it on target. Located here on a pylon at either Station 2 or 10, depending on pilot preference, the pod measures 87 inches long and is 16 inches in diameter. Inside this roughly 440-pound pod are a series of high-resolution, forward-looking infrared sensors, laser designators, and CCTV cameras. The pilots can spot man-sized targets up to 28 miles away. But for this fight, the A-10s were going to get up close and personal. As the pilots neared their time on top, they could see the Houthis blissfully unaware as they rolled their fully loaded launcher out of a cave. With no enemy radars up due to US forces knocking them out in prior strikes, the A-10s came in low and slow. At a distance of 6,500 meters away, they let loose with their cannons and gave him the burst the aircraft is so famous for. Although each aircraft carries roughly 1,150 30mm rounds inside an internal drum magazine, the pilots typically limit their bursts to 1 to 2 seconds to conserve ammo and prevent overheating. But in those 2 seconds, the A-10s fired about 260 baseball-sized rounds, each going at 3,500 feet per second. As one can probably guess, the launcher was neutralized. But this was just the opening act of a very dangerous play by the US Air Force. On April 2nd, an ISR satellite detected unusual heat signatures northeast of Sada. Since very few people in Yemen own a car, much less a 5-ton truck, intelligence flagged it as a probable mobile launcher and passed it along to the Air Force for a closer look. But there was a problem. Although the A-10 is a very capable aircraft, it is much slower and flies much lower than traditional fighters to engage with its 30mm cannon. Because of this, the Warthog is much more susceptible to ground fire. Because of this, a 1,200-pound titanium bathtub surrounds the pilot. These armored bubbles can easily eat 23mm rounds and sometimes higher, as seen in the Gulf War and conflict in Iraq. But the A-10 is not impervious to all ground fire. With the Houthis now fully aware the A-10s were in theater, the call went out far and wide, and soon every Houthi radar left was scanning the skies, looking for an easy victory. Thankfully, these aircraft were not gonna let them. These planes are called EA-18G Growlers. If you think they look like F-18s, that's because they kind of are. Built on the same body, these aircraft are specially modified with sensors and weapons specially designed for a mission called Suppression of Enemy Air Defenses, or SEAD. Think of SEAD like this. Would you rather go into a fight with a really big guy and have a 50-50 shot of not getting whooped, or would you rather poke the guy in both eyeballs first and then hit him? That's essentially what SEAD is, since the Growler's main mission is taking out Houthi radars with systems like this. This system here on this Growler is called the Next Generation Jammer, and here's how it helps clear the skies for the incoming A-10s. As Houthi gunners turn on their radars, they send out a particular frequency. Since the next-gen jammers in service operate in the mid-band of frequencies around the 2 to 6 GHz range, any radar pulsing in that range can get picked up. This is because the US maintains a mission library of every adversary search, surface, fire control, and missile radar in the world. When the system picks up these signals, it automatically knows what kind of system it is and uses basic geometry to figure out where the enemy radar is located. The pilot then sends out a continuous burst of about 270 kilowatts of power towards the Houthi radar. Because radars know the time when every radar wave is sent out and know what time it arrives, the radar uses that data to help figure out the position. However, when blasted with such a strong energy pulse, the radar can't see any of its own emissions, because this jammer is just overloading the system with a continuous stream of energy. Although some modern radars are jam resistant, most Houthi ones are based on legacy Soviet or Iranian models that get fried. Think of it kinda like plugging in an appliance into the wall that sucks up too much energy and damages the outlet. It's the same principle here. Within 15 minutes, the Growlers from the USS Eisenhower had knocked out 3 Houthi radar installations. Now blinded, the A-10s were given the all-clear to begin their run. Using their lightning targeting pods, they picked up movement. 3 launchers, including one where the Houthis were putting a camouflage tarp on to hide it again. The lead pilot fired a laser-guided AGM-65 Maverick from 26 miles away to prevent them from getting away. With its 125-pound shaped charge, the Maverick struck the first launcher's center mass. The secondary detonation from the missile on board was huge. Shrapnel tore through the other 2 nearby launchers and knocked fist-sized holes into them. Their teams attempted to flee in a Toyota pickup, but they didn't make it far. The trailing Warthog rolled in low. At just under 250 knots, the pilot squeezed a trigger. A half-second burst of the GAU-8 sent 50 rounds slamming into the truck and neutralized 4 more operators. By April 10th, Houthi activity had visibly shifted. Launch points previously active went cold. According to signals collection efforts, communications between field commanders and their Iranian handlers took on a more defensive tone. IRGC advisors reportedly relocated to Siwan and began hiding deeper underground. Instead of cell phones, they set up more redundant antenna relays and buried fiber optic cable. But there was no hiding from a combat aircraft that can hunt with heat. Thanks to the A-10's Lightning Pod, the Warthog isn't reliant on satellite data alone. Once a general grid has been identified as potentially hostile, the pilot can patrol visually, waiting for movement, and track vehicle exhaust or heat seeping through underground bunkers. In fact, the pod is so refined, its sensors can even differentiate between idling engines and decoys meant to throw it off. Add in some drone overwatch, and each A-10 becomes the airborne apex predator. The Houthis knew this, but they underestimated how long a Warthog is willing to wait. One crew made that mistake on April 13th. Operating out of Dhafra province, they wheeled out a launcher preloaded with the C-802, set up near an irrigation berm, and awaited GPS log from their Iranian handlers. Unfortunately for them, a US drone had spotted the movement 40 minutes earlier. A Warthog was already on station and soon inbound. At 3,000 feet, flying just over the mountaintops, the pilot waited just until he reached the Maverick's ideal release range of around 7 nautical miles. With the ability to carry 6 of these missiles, with 3 under each wing, the pilot let loose with 2 of them to neutralize the launcher and its accompanying radar. Upon seeing the Warthog, the Houthi gunners abandoned their launchers and tried to run, but the last thing they heard was a bird, and it was all over. But believe it or not, the A-10 didn't even have to engage directly in many cases to neutralize Houthi launchers. Here's how it did it. Because sometimes the Houthis hide their launchers in crowded population centers, the US needs a way to neutralize the launchers without causing civilian casualties. This often proves impossible in highly built-up urban areas. That is why the A-10s will use this maneuver called a show of force. When an A-10 pilot conducts a show of force, they are basically putting on their best poker face for the enemy. It works like this. Back at base, the ground crews will load down the A-10 to the max. 6 Mavericks, a full drum of 30mm ammo, targeting pod, everything it needs to do its work. When the A-10s are on station performing their combat air patrols, if they get called to an area where the Houthis are firing around a lot of people, the A-10s will first swoop in and act like they're going to attack. Of course, the Houthis aren't going to stick around and ask to make sure. After they and anyone else around them run away for cover, the A-10s can either come in for another pass themselves or call it in to other air assists. And though these tactics may seem unorthodox, by mid-April, the data clearly showed they were working. Houthi missile activity had dropped by nearly 70% compared to the start of the month. Navy ships in the Red Sea reported fewer radar locks, and some tankers even resumed passage without a naval escort, for the first time in 2 months. It was a quiet victory, no headlines, but one that mattered. Strategically, the A-10 success has reignited debates over close air support. While the Air Force still plans to retire the fleet by 2029, Marine and Navy commanders have petitioned for extended deployment rotations. This is because the numbers speak for themselves. From April 2nd through April 17th, the A-10s flew 218 sorties without a single US loss. According to CENTCOM, 47 confirmed missile systems have been knocked out, along with 9 senior Houthi commanders neutralized. Because of this, the A-10 has proven itself a valuable asset in what many have considered a Navy-centric fight. And while debate still swirls on the A-10's future, for Houthis in the field, the only question they ask when they see an A-10 is if it's just passing by or lining up a shot. Bye for now.